Hi, I'm Marc and welcome to the weekly Outside Views report on American politics. And today I start with a more fun topic. The planned resettlement of hippos, which are breeding uncontrollably in Colombia, will probably cost a lot of money. The money cost is not the fun part. The entire operation should cost around $3.5 million, said the owner of the Ostok protected area in northern Mexico, Ernesto Zazueta, on Wednesday, where 10 of the giant pachyderms are to be housed. The animals, which come from Africa, were once settled in the Colombian region of Medellin by drug lord Pablo Escobar and have now become a real plague there. The governor of the Colombian region of Antioquia, Anibal Gaviria, wants to save the animals from being shot down. 70 of the almost 150 hippos in the region are to be flown out to protected areas in India and Mexico in the coming months. The goal is the first half of 2023, he said. The animals are to be lured into cages with food in order to then make them transportable, as the British Guardian reported. The hippos are descendant from the 4 specimens that Escobar had flown in from Africa in the 1980s for his private zoo. After the powerful drug lord was killed in a police operation in 1993, the pachyderms were released. They have since populated an area around the Magdalena River, where authorities say they are threatening local wildlife and people living along the river. The governments of Germany and Italy have returned more than 80 archaeological finds to Mexico. The return of the artifacts from pre-Columbian cultures is a sign of good cooperation to protect Mexico's cultural property, said Mexico's Culture Minister Alejandro Frausto on Tuesday. 40 pieces were flown from Germany to Mexico, including a stone head from the Olmec culture that dates to between 1200 and 600 BC, as local media reported. The artifacts will initially be displayed in the museum of the Templo Mayor, the former main temple of the Aztecs in Mexico City. The return ceremony took place in the National Palace in Mexico City in the presence of Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador and representatives of the German and Italian governments. After the historical charges against former US President Donald Trump, he is expected in court in New York this week. According to media reports, the official indictment reading to which Trump must appear is to take place tomorrow in Manhattan. The case is about hush money payments to a porn actress. Calls came from the ranks of radical Trump supporters from the right-wing edge of the Republican Party to travel to the US metropolis and protest at the appointment. The city is preparing for a large crowd and also for possible demonstrations. Trump is the first ex-president in the history of the United States to face criminal charges. The district attorney's office in Manhattan on Thursday evening announced indictments against the Republican, who is running again for presidential candidacy in the November 2024 election. Shortly before his election to the presidency in 2016, Trump paid hush money to porn actress Stormy Daniels after she claimed she had had sex with him. Trump denies an affair, but not that money flowed. The payment could conflict with campaign finance rules, and that's what this case is about. The indictment is still under lock and key. The exact charges and details are therefore still unclear and will only become public when the indictment is read out. According to Europol, investigators in Brazil dug up an internationally operating drug network and confiscating cocaine worth several billion euros. 15 people were arrested, as announced by Europol in The Hague on Friday. In the course of the investigation, 17 tons of cocaine were confiscated, which is said to have a sales value of several billion euros, as I said. According to Europol, assets worth 80 million euros were seized during the action on Thursday. It's about one of the most active drug networks in Brazil, which has flooded Europe with huge shipments of cocaine. The gang's entire infrastructure had been smashed, as Europol said, from suppliers in Paraguay to shipping and money laundering organizations. 37 objects were searched, 173 vehicles and 1 plane were confiscated, and the accounts of 147 people and 66 companies were blocked. According to the information, steps were also taken in Spain to confiscate the assets of gang members. In Colombia, President Gustavo Petro's peace efforts are hanging in the balance after a rebel attack. 9 soldiers were killed by guerrillas from the left-wing National Liberation Army, the ELN group, near the border with Venezuela. There they are said to have guarded the largest oil pipeline in the country. It is the most serious incident since Petro started peace talks with the ELN last year. The president then convened a meeting of the government's negotiating delegation for the peace talks and representatives of the countries guaranteeing the peace process. They include Venezuela, Mexico, and Chile. The ELN initially did not comment. Petro also condemned the attack on Twitter. The attackers are people who are still a long way from peace, he wrote. This must be serious and responsible towards Colombian society. In the run-up to the meeting, Colombian Peace Commissioner Danilo Rueda did not want to rule out the possibility that negotiations with the ELN could be suspended after the recent events. The president, Colombia's first left-wing head of state, only announced at the end of last year that his government had agreed a ceasefire with several armed groups, including the ELN, until the end of June. 10 days later, however, they denied the existence of such an agreement, whereupon the government suspended the ceasefire. The Venezuelan judge Maria Lourdes Afiuni has been awarded the Human Rights Prize of the German Association of Judges. The prize directs a spotlight into the darkness of injustice, said the president of the Federal Court of Justice, Bettina Limberg, on Wednesday in her eulogy at the award ceremony of the German Judges and Public Prosecutors Day in Weimar. Afiuni was unable to accept the award in person, as she is not allowed to leave her country. According to the German Association of Judges, the lawyer was arrested by the political police in December 2009 on flimsy charges of corruption. In a televised speech, Venezuela's then ruler Hugo Chavez called for Afiuni to be sentenced to 30 years in prison. She was released on parole in mid-2013 and finally sentenced to 5 years in prison in March 2019. According to the information, she is still not allowed to work in her profession and is not allowed to keep a bank account. At least 39 people died in a fire at a migrant shelter in northern Mexico. 29 other people were injured in the fire at the facility in the city of Ciudad Juarez on the border with the United States, as the Mexican Immigration Service said on Tuesday. The cause of fire was unclear for the moment. According to the INM, 68 adult men from Central and South America were staying in the accommodation at the time of the accident. According to media reports, the migrants had been picked up at various border crossings in Ciudad Juarez the day before. They had been taken to the migrant shelter to later be deported to their home countries. Brazilian ex-president Jair Bolsonaro says he does not want to become opposition leader in his home country. But he will work with his party and work for them, as Bolsonaro told CNN Brazil on Wednesday before his planned return from the United States to the South American country. For example, he wants to travel through Brazil and talk to supporters. CNN Brazil showed how Bolsonaro took photos with supporters at Orlando Airport and passed controls. The broadcaster accompanies the return of Bolsonaro, who was due to arrive in Brazil's capital Brasilia on Thursday morning. He is right there at the moment. And right-wing Bolsonaro was defeated by left-wing politician Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva in the runoff election for the presidency in October 22. 2 days before the end of his term on New Year's Eve, Bolsonaro flew to the United States with his family, where he has been ever since. According to media reports, he applied for a 6-month tourist visa. On January 8th, Bolsonaro supporters who did not want to recognize Lula's election victory stormed Congress, the seat of government, and the Supreme Court in Brasilia, causing considerable damage. The Supreme Court, based in the capital, is investigating, among other things, intellectual authorship and the role of Bolsonaro. And this concludes this week's report on American politics, but the next report is right here in the end screen. And have a look in the video description. I have a lot of other channels you might find interesting. And I'll see you in my next video. I'll be back.